Hi, it's Eva here at Breva Creative, and today I found some metal bits that I will be turning into earrings. I wanted to try making hammered copper things, so I found some pipe fittings and I wanted to try to hammer those. Let's see how that goes. And we'll make some cuties like these. So I found these copper fittings at the local hardware store, and since I wanted to work with copper, I thought I would slice these open, flatten them out, and work with that. So I'm just going to start with a hacksaw and open up the cylinders. Again, don't come at me, I'm not a professional here, I'm just showing you what you can do with what's around the house. Hacksaw might not be the best tool for this job, but it worked, and we're going to go with it. So I'm just going to use some pliers to unravel that cylinder, just kind of pry it open and flat. And this actually ended up resulting in some ridges, simply because a cylinder doesn't really want to be flat. So the copper was actually crazy thick, so here I'm trying to hammer it into a hammered copper look, and it just was not having it. The copper is still too thick to really hammer with this hammer, and the hammer itself is leaving kind of ugly marks and not round marks like I had liked. So I found a piece of aluminum flashing in my garage that I've had on hand for a while, and I'm going to do a side-by-side with that because it's a significantly thinner metal, so I was able to actually hammer it into more of a hammered metal look that I liked. Once I got the aluminum all hammered out, I decided I was going to make the aluminum piece into some leaves, some earring leaves. So I'm going to shape that with some paper. I'm just going to draw it out. So I have a stencil and I can get two identical leaves. And I wanted it to be symmetrical, so I drew it on half the piece of paper and then unfolded it so that I had a perfectly symmetrical, happy little leaf at the end. I'm just going to use a Sharpie to transfer the shape onto the aluminum, and then I am going to cut that out. Here I'm using tin snips that I have laying around, but honestly this aluminum is so thin you could almost use a really heavy-duty pair of kitchen shears. Just don't use ones that you care about, because who knows, it might ruin them. Don't quote me on anything. It really cut pretty easily. It was like using scissors on cardboard. The copper needed a slightly heavier duty tool, and so I busted out my very old and
kind of frightening
Dremel tool with a grinder bit, and I just hacked away at it until I got it severed. The curves were a little tough to do, so I cleaned those up a little bit with some sandpaper, and also I went ahead and went all the way around all the edges, getting those nasty sharp bits off. I really liked the way the scratches looked on these little rectangles, so I wanted to keep those and actually add to it just to give it kind of a rusticy vibe. So I found this sharp tool in the shop, and I hope Brad isn't mad that I'm using it to scratch up some copper. And lastly, to make a proper hole, I used a tiny little drill bit and popped a hole that we will be able to use to attach it to the earring hook later. Next, I'm going to clean up these little arches. I was trying to round them out a little bit, and it did work a tiny bit with this really coarse 80 grit sandpaper, but it took forever. I kind of liked the way that it was turning out. I think they are perfect spooky little Halloween gravestones. Maybe I'll wear them for Halloween next week. As I was sanding, I really liked the way that the ridges looked when I sanded them. The dark bits stayed in the low areas, and the high bits were shiny, so it resulted in this cool striped effect. Sanding the aluminum was a tiny bit harder. I had to be careful not to bend the aluminum, but it worked out and I got the sharp edges gone. So next I whipped out my trusty set of metal stamps and decided to stamp the aluminum. The copper ended up being way too thick and I wasn't able to stamp anything onto it, but the aluminum worked out really great. I just lined up those letters and gave them a good hard whack, and I was able to create a great impression that I'm super happy with. I tried really hard not to need to double stamp anything because I was afraid I'd get kind of a duplicate in place, and it actually wasn't that hard to just do it in one go. And I'm writing the second word backwards just to make sure that it's spaced correctly to the bottom of the leaf. So I'm just using a little bit of isopropyl alcohol here to wipe off those Sharpie marks on the edges of the leaves. And then I'm actually going to come back in with some Sharpie with a trick that I found online. I'm going to fill those letters up as much as I can with that permanent Sharpie ink, get it really good in there, and then I'm going to come back and buff off the surface with that same isopropyl rag, and that helps me darken the letters so that they show up a whole lot better later. Don't want to rub too hard or you might have to come back in with some more Sharpie, depending on how deep your impression is. But I thought this was a really cool trick when I found it online, and it worked out really great for me. You can see here the sideways M is actually because I had to double stamp that one. The first impression didn't go well, so I just went ahead and double stamped it, and then I realized that I had turned my letter in the process. But that's okay, it adds character. Ta-da! Now those letters show up way better. And for the aluminum, I'm just using a little metal punch that I found at my local craft store, and that popped through that aluminum so easy. I totally didn't need a drill bit for these, which I love things that are easy. Now those are all ready to turn into some super cool earrings. So I'm just using some jump rings and some earring hooks to get everything connected here. A jump ring always adds just a little extra dangle and makes it a little bit easier to work with, so you don't have to pry your earring hook open to get that connected directly to the piece. I like the jump ring in there as a spanner. I absolutely love how these little arches ended up turning out with that wavy, stripy pattern. It's a little bit zebra-y, it's a little bit spooky. Fabulous. And the little copper earrings are so dainty. I'm totally going to wear those to work. They're going to be staples of mine for sure. Alright, well, I really enjoyed doing that. I am super happy with the results. I will be wearing these frequently. In the meantime, y'all, let us know if you tried something like this. As always, tag us at Briva Creative, and like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. Follow us on our Instagram. Our TikTok is brand new. We're trying that out, so go follow us over there to help us get started there, and bye!